It's truly a pleasure to have you here with us today for this very engaging coffee chat. We're joined by Fatema Nazarali, the Senior Director of Sales and Marketing at IFSE Institute, who boasts an impressive 20-year tenure in the financial industry. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Great. So how are you today, Fatema?
So far, so good. I can't complain. It's a little gloomy out there, but the fall colors are still out, so it's beautiful.
I couldn't agree more. You're absolutely right. Before we get into some more formal question, which of course I do have some for you, how about you let us know a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So you've mentioned I am the Senior Sales Director at IFSE Institute. I've worked at IFSE Institute, oh my goodness, for, as you mentioned, well over 21 years. So I am dating myself there, a really long time. I've held a variety of different roles within the organization. So started off as a bilingual customer service rep, then went on to inside sales, then strategic account manager. So yeah, it's been great.
Wow. Well, beside having so many roles, I did hear something very interesting about you. So you do speak French. Where is that coming from?
Yeah, alors oui, je parle français. Alors j'ai appris mon français en Afrique. So fun fact, I grew up in Africa and that's where I learned my French.
That's great. Ça veut dire que je vais pouvoir te parler en français alors?
Absolument.
Let's not do this because the audience won't get anything we say. That's great. So to kick things off, could you provide our audience with some background information about IFSE Institute?
Absolutely. So IFSE Institute has been around since the 1960s. We primarily offer financial services education courses, so mutual funds, insurance, exempt market, as well as continuing education courses. We're owned by IFIC, which is the Investment Funds Institute of Canada. We are a not-for-profit, and we have an amazing customer service department, so we pride ourselves on service.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. I had a great experience with the customer service.
That's great.
That's for sure.
That's great.
So you've had a very long standing working relationship with SeeWhy Learning, I heard.
Yes.
Could you share with how long have you been working together and how the relationship has evolved over time?
Oh, for sure. So SeeWhy Learning and IFSE Institute have probably worked together, well, oh my goodness, probably well over 10 years together.
Wow.
We started off by providing their LQP tools as an add-on to our insurance program. And then it evolved where we embedded their program, their LQP tools into our program, into our course. For mutual funds, it's still offered as an a la carte option. So that's how the relationship started and has evolved.
Great. That's great. That's great. So what sets SeeWhy apart from other educational providers, in your opinion? Can you highlight a few key reasons for choosing SeeWhy over other providers?
Absolutely. So personally speaking, I like the fact that they have an array of different tools. So they've got exam practice questions, they've got flashcards, they've got their study guide, as well as their videos. So I think the fact of the different learning methodologies that they have, I think is very useful, and it's great for our students.
Absolutely. I heard they have quizzes, flashcard, practice question, the YouTube videos. I mean, that's definitely great.
Yep.
So let's delve into the student's experience. I don't want to cut you off guard in here, but how have your student responded to and benefited from using SeeWhy learning tools?
Yeah, so I mean, let's face it, some of our students, English is not their first language. So I find that they're easy to understand a language that they use in their material, very, very useful. So I think, just that, their use of analogies, their use of examples, is very, very useful. I remember one of the coaches, actually, I think it was like term insurance they were referring to and then relating it back to car insurance. So not a lot of people know about term insurance, but car insurance, a lot of people have cars, right? So just that connection as well between the materials, I found very, very useful. And I believe our students find that very useful as well.
No, absolutely. Those analogies that are utilized in everyday life, I think it makes it quite easy to remember. I mean, what do you remember from back in the day at university level? Like everything was really memorized,
exactly,
right?
Well, I mean, you memorized just to pass an exam, and then a couple months later ask me what I learned. Was just trying to pass an exam.
That's right. Where with SeeWhy, obviously, your student has seen the difference.
For sure.
That's great. That's great. So from your perspective, Fatema, how does SeeWhy elevate your students' understanding compared to other methods of learning?
Yeah, so I mean, as I was mentioning before, you're teaching to understand and not teaching to pass an exam. So I think the use of, the examples, their analogies, their practice exam questions, the consistency of doing the material over and over again, you understand better, right? So I think it caters to, students that prefer either, doing repetitive work It caters to people who are visual in terms of looking at videos, for example. So I think that's very, very useful.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you did mention the word consistency. I think that's
Yes.
huge. That's huge.
Yes, it
But
is.
more huge, definitely huge, but not as huge as teaching to understand. And I know you repeatedly mentioned
Yeah.
teaching to understand.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, I do know what that means though, right? But I just want to know, and I think our audience wants to know as
Yeah.
well, what do you mean teaching to understand?
Well, I mean, what I mean about teaching to understand, as I've said before, you're trying to pass an exam, right? So a lot of times you're just, memorizing, as we've talked to before, and you're not really understanding that concept. So if an exam provider, for example, changes an exam question, and now you're trying to pass that exam, because you were memorizing, you might not understand it. So by understanding the concepts, regardless of if an exam provider has changed that question, for example,
Right.
you'll now be able to answer that, that question because you understand the concept and you can use it as well. So I think that's really useful.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I've heard a lot of anywhere, anytime, and now teaching to understand, I think it's really accessible to, that concept is accessible really anytime,
Yeah,
basically.
for sure.
Because
For
you
sure.
understand it rather than actually memorizing
Absolutely.
it. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think that's useful too. And I mean, let's just face it too, with SeeWhy Learning, what I appreciate about them, as you've mentioned before, is the YouTube videos, for example. So, I'm a strong believer in like financial literacy. So I think that's, extremely important. So having videos out there on YouTube teaching you about various things that's going on either in the industry or in the market, you don't need to be enrolled in a course, for example. I think that's so beneficial and it's great. I think it's great.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, there's a lot of students that, they would just understand just by reading the textbook or the study guide or quiz question and all that, where the videos are more a source of, that platform being in place allows you to actually observe as well, right?
Yeah,
so
and it's a source of information and it's great. Yeah,
totally,
for sure.
totally. I definitely don't want to end our conversation, but I know your time is very valuable. So as our coffee chat draws to a very close end, I would like to extend a heartfelt thank you to you, Fatema. Thank you for taking the time to share your insight into the importance of SeeWhy and your students' learning journey, your collaboration with SeeWhy, and of course, your advocacy for their services are greatly appreciated.
Thanks so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.